think we are now live streaming. So, hey everyone, this is the Quality Department Group Conversation for June 1st, calendar year 2022. We have some of the slides and presentation from the key review. And with that, I believe we have the first question from Marshall already. Marshall says he may not be able to present. I'm going to go ahead and vocalize for Marshall then. So it feels like we're lacking a single good entry point for folks to start contributing. The customer onboarding link deck links to a few of these links. And additionally, our contributor docs are very broad and difficult to digest. And they seem more tailored to internal team than general contributors. And then he's asking if we should start polishing up the contributor docs for this. We have started some of this work with the community relations team. Christos, do you want to take this question? I know you've been leading a bunch of unifying contribution guides for the community.
Sure, for sure, thanks. Yeah, just really briefly, we went through and did some iteration on the contributing guide, which actually resulted in a drop of the exit rate of 7% within a month, which it's a positive thing. We still have a lot of things to do, but we're in the process of going through all the docs. We've been going through all the docs and making sure that we don't have any infinity loops or drop-offs there. And the idea is like as a single sort of truth to link the contribute guide, which the contribute guide links to the relevant Google Doc, GitLab docs for onboarding, and yeah, everything else should also link to the contributing guide.
I ended up being able to join. Did you already go over the question related to like our engineers reporting whether or not MRs are in line with our contribution guidelines up front, or is that something like, do we know if that's something that we regularly have to coach people through?
I don't think we touched on G and H yet, so let's dive in. I believe we see occurrences that pipelines are not being run or pipelines are not green, so the coaches had to go in and ask them to rerun the jobs or add a test. I'm not sure if Nick, if you see any of these observance, because we're pushing for the MRs earlier this month.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit early to state any like factual data, but what we do, what we're planning to work on and are working on right now is actually have like a more rigid workflow in a way, so that it's more clear like where the responsibility is of like, are you still working on this, or what is the status? And indeed, like either maybe the pipeline isn't run, or there's like some other acceptance criteria that's not fully clear. So that's one of our focus points for the next couple weeks, months, is to make that more clear. Whatever that more clear may mean, and that's still something that we're digging into. Yeah, sorry, that's not maybe the answer that you're hoping for saying yes, but we're still exploring.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing to point G. I think when I speak to contributors in general, the things that I hear people find difficult to navigate is like the issue backlog. It can be hard for people to find an issue because there's just such a large volume of them. And it can be intimidating when you pull up the issue list and you see tens of thousands of issues. And even if you know which labels to use, it still often results in a query that may return hundreds of issues. And I think that that's a bit overwhelming for folks. Christos has done a nice job piloting a new kind of contribution event that we're calling themed months, where we try to target contributors to a specific part of the code base to alleviate some of that overwhelming feeling and give people more direction. And we're going to try and do something similar with like a new initiative that we're calling our code challenge, where we'll have a small set of issues that we direct people who are participating in that challenge towards. And so that will hopefully give people, like narrow things down and make it a little less overwhelming for folks.
Mark, I'm not sure if that answers all your question. I do think there's still a lot more work to do to streamline the docs. I think we can follow up with a future plan on on what's next. We're collaborating with John's team and Christos on making sure that the guide is streamlined.
Yeah, maybe to add one more thing on that. Everybody is different in how they start to contribute. So some people are fine in reading a lot of documentation and then start a merge request or starting from an issue, but some people will just dive in, see what sticks, and then maybe come back a couple of weeks later. So we need to figure out how to accommodate for all these kind of entry points. Like having just a single landing page probably won't solve all of the conflicts or difficulties.
And Marshall, if you could link to the customer onboarding deck that you referenced in your first point, I think that would be useful for the folks who are working on this to be able to review that and see if there's a way that we can, as one of the steps of this process, improve that the direction that we're providing in that deck that you referenced, because I don't think I've seen that.
Sure, yeah. It was in the it was a link that was embedded in the key review doc, but I just pasted it there.
Thank you.
And another thing that I see people, particularly like new people, struggle with is finding the right DRI to ping for like initial code review. And I know the process is like a bit convoluted sometimes between like the handoff of from like product to engineering. Like a lot of times I see the product manager step in and then sort of like triage it to an engineer. Is there something like do we feel good about like our code owners file in like the main repo? Do we feel like that directs people to somebody who could appropriately review their MR most of the time? I know there's like various bots too that try to automate that, but
if I can add on that, I think our MR coaches are doing a lot of great job right now, finding the appropriate people to review that and following up with them. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. The bots for auto assigning mentor reviewers, as far as I understand right now, it's not open for community MRs, which is something that we're,
gotcha.
I talked to the relevant team, and it's something that they want to open in the future. But yeah, I cannot speak to that based on my personal experience. It's working, but not as great as we would like to, for sure.
Let me put some more clarity here. Marshall, I think you asked about code owners. I think we have partial implementation of it in some of the areas. We have an OKR this quarter to expand for other reasons, to make sure the high impact code areas are reviewed by the correct code owners. But I don't think it's the first source of truth that the community uses to ask for the review. I believe it's the MR coaches and the reviewer roulette that's next. So there's still work to align.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I forgot about the whole MR coach process. So yeah, that makes sense. And I'm looking at the handbook. I can't tell offhand. MR coaches are engineers, right?
MR coaches are engineers, and I believe there's some that are also technical writers too.
Okay, right.
So great questions by Marshall. I'd like to open the floor for anyone else who would like to contribute to questions. All right, I'll give folks a few minutes, but I want to say that we ended May with 119 contributors per month, and that is that's a good progress that we've seen from the past month. I'll link the PI in the document in a bit, so folks can also see. And thanks for Nick, Remy, all the MR coaches, Christos and John. I think we've been pushing a lot of the contributors this month.
And maybe to also add to that, we do need your help in getting our target next month as well, also from the beginning of the month. I think what we notice now is that we do a push at the end of the month all together, but ideally it is like a constant effort. And we'd like to ask very, very friendly for your help for the entire period, if you will, to get our targets together.
One other thing I just thought of, and I'll type it out as I go here. Do we have charts that show like the time to merge for contributor MRs like on a per project basis? I'm curious if like my intuition would be that MRs get merged faster on repositories other than the mono repo, just because it's a less complex review process, but I'd like to validate that assumption if it would be easy to do.
Yeah, maybe to answer that, or maybe Mac, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure if that intuition is entirely correct, because some of the interest fields, for example, Runner, a lot of people are working with Runner, also contributors, and maybe also submit a lot of merge requests. And one of the tasks that we have for the next coming weeks is to investigate if one of those projects or areas are actually like more overloaded than others, to then see if we need to put more focus on, for example, and not necessarily a fact, but Runner, and see if we can help out more in that area. I would agree maybe with your intuition, but we need to look at the data itself. We do have a graph that says what the data is between starting of the merge request and then the merging itself. So we do keep track on the overall age. And if you've maybe seen that also from the key review, is that we notice that like the quicker that you can anticipate on a merge request, the more likely it is that it gets merged. That's kind of also intuition, but also the data kind of supports that statement.
Yeah, I think an idea here would be to look at the top 5 most contributed projects and then see the differences in the mean time to merge for those 5. And as a future iteration, I think what you're looking on in the next sprint and next period is impactful. So looking forward to that analysis.
And then one more, unless somebody else wants to jump in.
Go ahead, Marshall. You take the floor this time. Super appreciate all your comments.
It looks, Marshall, that we should do a coffee chat, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Or if you want to join our team, I think we have an opening too.
Yeah, I'll see what we can do about an interim position. So I've always enjoyed the release MVPs. I think that's a great way to highlight individual contributors, and usually like when I see that MVP cherry picked from all the contributors, it makes sense. Like it's an obvious like big win feature or fix that they implemented. I wonder if there's also an opportunity to highlight like sustained contributions, since that's what we really care about going forward. Because like we were just talking about it in Slack, but I love the dev stats from the Kubernetes community where everybody can go in and like it's basically like a, you know, you can easily see the top contributors and the top contributing companies, organizations, and stuff like that. Kubernetes doesn't really highlight that in any way aside from the stats, but I think like there's an opportunity for us to like have some sort of like blog post or something that highlights those sustained contributions a little better.
That-
And
those are-
maybe we could even just like consolidate with like the Heroes program or something like that, because I don't want like to just be purely additive. I think we have like plenty of programs, but maybe we can, think about how to highlight those folks a little better.
It's semi-related. I'll preface something for Nick here, but in the key review slide, we have some preliminary analysis on what is it like to get recurring contributors. And the analysis that Nick did was around 10 MRs. Nick, you want to speak to that? I think this is all your
Sure,
knowledge.
and maybe also Marshall, I'll share the boring solution that I did basically in Google Sheets to get some analysis on that data. But what we did is to dig into the contributor merge request data and then found out if it's more likely that someone leaves or stays, and then to find that breaking point, as in do you have like 3 contributions and do you then keep coming back, or is it more like 10? And then the data says it's more like 10. So it needs like 10 contributions for someone to feel comfortable to then stay. So indeed, you want to highlight those that are sustained contributors or recurring contributors, because that is like a healthy way to grow the open source ecosystem in that way. So if you're okay with that, I'll share the spreadsheet with you so you can like dig into that data, and then we need to figure out how to expose that data either on an automatic way or maybe in the newsletter, and understand what we want to do with that data.
Cool. Yeah.
There is also an issue where I put a summary of all that data. I don't know, Mac, if you have that at first hand. We can link it in the documents or in the group conversation documents.
And just like to add something, I did some really brief analysis on Maze numbers, and something that I noticed is like a lot of contributions came from our high-performing contributors, people who've been contributing in the past, but for X, Y, Z reason, they didn't in the past few months, and they joined our hackathon, all our efforts, and we've seen like a small influx in terms of the number of MRs also created, but merged. So we know that this target group is something that we're focusing on and would like to celebrate, highlight, and enable more.
I linked the issue for you, Nick. I think it's there. So if folks are interested to see Nick's analysis, it's linked there. And we think that 10 is pretty high. We need to look at other communities too. If that number is not 10, it's probably 5. Why in our process it takes 10 for any community members to be comfortable and they're freestyling after that? We should make that number lower. If it's 5, it's probably easier to retain contributors too. Brian, you have an update. You want to vocalize your point in E?
Yeah, I'm so glad that I just happened to jump in on this call.
Welcome.
Yeah. Because, and I linked to it in the document, getting more engagement and feedback on the MVP nominations is something that's been on my radar. Marshall, I'm glad to hear that you enjoy seeing those. From the release post manager side of things, it feels a little bit like pulling teeth to get those handful of nominations. And so the idea that you recommend about is there a way to recognize ongoing contributions is a great one. Another idea that's been floated is sometimes there's a group contribution, 2 or 3 community contributors add something. So all to say, I linked to it here in the document, a thread related to MVP nominations in our release post 15.0 retro issue. It's on my radar. Any additional thoughts and ideas that you all have, I am very open to them, because I will say it feels like an important thing to recognize each release. And it seems like we get 2 or 3 nominations each time, and I'm just kind of waiting on a release where where a nomination doesn't get surfaced from the team. So thanks.
And thanks for the feedback, Brian. Why don't we keep the conversations between our teams going, I'll invite you to the working group channel that we are tracking community contributions, and they're pushing it month to month, and then at least we can get some eyes on from you on who we think we can nominate.
And if possible, I'm happy to have an issue in the contributor success project to understand if we could maybe like automate that process of saying these are the people that are nominated because they are impactful contributors in the last 3 months or last month or so.
Yeah, and I think like it should be easy to generate the list of nominations because those are just the folks that contributed in that milestone, right? But I think more importantly, like having those metrics allows us to make a more informed decision about who to pick as opposed to it being like purely qualitative, right? Especially if we see people that are like on that cusp of what we deem as like being sticky or not, right? Like if we have somebody that has a relatively high impact contribution and that's their like 8th contribution, we want to push them over that like over that tipping point to 10,
totally agree.
highlighting them as the MVP as opposed to like somebody that had roughly an equivalent change, but you know they regularly contribute all the time, right? Or have even been an MVP nominee in the past already.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Nick, can you please take the action item? Let's get an issue out so we can, I think it aligns with the stickiness of the 10 contributors and the MVP.
All right.
Cool, thank you. We are 3 minutes to 25. See if Marshall has another question for us or not. Else, you can end the call. All right, go contributors. Thank you everyone for joining. It was a very productive conversation today. See you all next time. And thank you, Marshall.